The Real Estate and Mortgage Show, your go-to spot for everything home buying, selling, and financing on News Talk 580 CFRA.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Again, just a quick reminder, if you have a question and you just don't feel comfortable calling in or just can't for whatever reason, head over to realestateandmortgageshow.com and submit your question there, and we'll get it on air as quick as we can,
next
either
episode.
Today or next show.
Next episode.
Next episode. All right, so some numbers we got this week, Frank, as well.
First week.
The job numbers.
First week. Decent numbers, actually. I mean, considering it's December, right? So, we saw 2-3 months before robust part-time numbers, not so good full-time numbers. This time around, the full-time numbers were actually quite decent. Part-time numbers, not as much.
Which is weird. Because it's Christmas time.
Thank you. And then the unemployment number went way up anyway. So, we went from 6.5 to 6.8 in the country.
That's
of course,
a heck
we had
of a jump.
we had a huge drop, and so I think there's a correction there. I always say there's corrections there.
Sure.
And then the U.S. Released theirs as well, and again, theirs were not as robust. And the difference in the U.S. is they have what's called corrections. They have revisions all the time.
Big revisions.
Big revision.
What
of
was that
drop.
number earlier in the year in the summer? They
it was
created like 500,000 jobs or something.
800 and something thousand less than what they reported.
And then the next month, the correction was,
crazy.
it was a fraction of that.
Yes, it's so you can't believe anything there. And
It's almost like someone's throwing a dart at a dartboard for a number.
Well, it feels that way, and then it feels that way sometimes here because the numbers just don't seem to make sense. So what we do expect, and most economists expect, is that the number in February is likely to be much worse because in January is when you typically see those jobs lost, that all those jobs that were gained in October, November because of Christmas season and all the shopping that happens in the last couple of months of the year, Black Friday and everything else that happens. Now all of a sudden those jobs are likely not there because in January or February are typically the weakest retail months.
Sure.
Of the year. So it'll be interesting. But other facets of the jobs, the manufacturing is struggling, obviously. But then there's other sections that are doing well. The public service jobs are going to be interesting to watch this year because obviously there's retirement packages out there, early retirement packages out there.
Have you felt that, though? Have you felt the government layoffs? I know they're getting rid of a lot of jobs. I haven't. Have you, like in your business, have you felt it? Because I don't feel like we've felt it much. Like we haven't got many calls from people saying, I lost my job, I can't buy, or I lost my job, I need to sell. We haven't had a lot of that. So
because the packages aren't out yet. They're coming out over the next 2 weeks. So over the next 2 weeks, we're going to get a lot of, specifically in Ottawa, because it really, really hits Ottawa the hardest. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to get these offers at 55 and over for early retirement and their pensions maybe as if they'd done the whole term. So it's going to be interesting. I've had a couple of clients call me and say, Frank, how does it impact my mortgage renewal? What happens if we want to add some money to the mortgage? And I always say, let's try and do it while you're still employed.
Right.
Even though most of them have said their plan isn't to retire. Their plan is to take this pension and then go out and get another job, even if it's a part-time job. I'll go out and get another job because as far as I'm concerned, I'm already getting my income from my full-time job, and this will just be additional income that we're making. So for some people, it could work out well. For others, it may not work out well. But, the goal, and I think the government's hoping that their attrition takes care of most of it so that they don't have to lay anyone off. But these packages might be very tempting for some people for sure. So,
well, especially as you said, like as you're getting, a little long in the tooth and at the end of your career, a lot of people don't want to be laid off and don't want to be let go. They may decide to retire, and others are going to sit there and wait for that package to come in. But we will see a good probably third, maybe even a little bit more due to, attrition and people who are sort of a little bit at the end of their careers anyways. I mean, I don't think we'll see a lot of young people laid off. I don't know, but, who knows?
Again, I mean, I think it depends on each department and what their quota is, and some departments may have more young people than others, and they may have to let go of some of the young people. But, people that have been in their jobs 20, 25, 30 years, have owned their homes for 15, 20, 25 years, hopefully they have a lot of equity built in their home that even if their mortgage is not paid off, their mortgage is a much smaller amount that they can sustain the fact that they have to early retire and they're still getting a decent pension and they can still afford it. And worst case scenario, what they may have to do is just increase the amortization to keep the payments more in line.
Up the amortization a little bit
and be able to stay in your home. So there's options out there. And I think people get nervous. And I'll tell you, I get more phone calls from people that are mad at themselves or disappointed at themselves because they think that they've done the wrong thing all along, when in essence they've done very well. I was talking to a couple yesterday, and they're upset because, again, their mortgage coming up in 5 years ago, and they need to add another $30,000 to cover, some of the credit cards and lines of credits that they have outstanding. And they're saying we feel like we're never going to pay this off, but yet what they've done in the 5 years is done a major renovation to the home, where the home has gone up in value about $100,000. So, where 5 years ago they had $200,000 worth of equity in their home, today they have, even with the refinance, they have $400,000 worth of equity.
You're in a way stronger position.
Way better position, and I'm the one who has to say to them, I get it. Your mortgage is still more than you want it to be, and you're in your 50s, but look at the big picture. And the big picture is you've got half your house paid for, and 5 years ago you were only at about 25% equity. Now you're up to 50% equity. So again, look at the good side of it. And again, this couple wants to live in it for another 5 years and then possibly downsize. And I think we're going to see a lot of that moving forward as our population ages and as life gets more expensive.
Right.
And you start to ask yourself, wait a second, it's only two of us. Why are we living in a 2,400 square foot home? There's no reason. We don't need it. So.
Well, but there is more and more people now who are not moving to retirement residence. They are staying in their homes.
It's expensive.
And a lot of people, but especially the price of homes nowadays, a lot of the elderly who don't want to go to a retirement residence, they probably have their house paid off at their age. And even some of these 2,400 square foot homes or 2,500 square foot homes, it's probably too costly for them to sell it, to downsize. A lot of them stay in these homes, and they just, they go in, they put not the elevators, but the stair lifts and stuff like that. I mean, it's just too costly, some of these guys, to get out of that home and even downsize, on that step to that retirement residence. But there's a lot of people who are just not going to the retirement residence.
Well, retirement residents are $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month
for a cheap one. For a cheap one.
Yeah, so that's my point. Like, you're better off to get a reverse mortgage and stay in your home if you could. Again, if you're physically able to.
Do those renovations that you need to do to be 100%. Able to stay in the home, like you were saying, like adding a stair lift or,
Well, because it's much cheaper, right? Like, I know some that are like, you have assisted living, then you have permanent living, then you have sort of the memory care unit, and then, they don't forget to take their pills, so they have someone who has to come give them their pills. Well, that's a cost. So I know people are paying upwards of $10,000, $12,000 a month to live in a retirement residence. Like, that's a lot of money. So there's more people nowadays that are staying in their property and just renovating those properties to make them conducive to their living right now.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. So we actually had a question this week come in from Sachin, which I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. He says he owns an investment townhouse in Bridlewood in Canada, which he purchased in 2024. It's about 23 years old. He's added a door to the lower level with an existing to the basement, and he's renting it out to two tenants instead of one now. So, and the property currently cash flows about $100 a month, he said. Okay. He basically wants to know he's torn between continuing to rent as is versus investing $15,000 to $20,000 in necessary renovations because of the age of the home, I assume. Should he renovate now to optimize the long-term returns, or wait and renovate closer to selling, or considering a hybrid strategy?
I guess I know there's two parts to that question, but the first part is, depends what those renovations are. If the renovations are things that are going to impact the house, like a window that's leaking or a roof that could possibly leak, those are the renovations you have to do. Right. But if you're renters...
Well, I think we had that conversation a couple of months ago where he said, that's actually not a renovation, that's maintenance.
That's maintenance. Like, you need that. Right. I mean, that impacts your house. But if it's something like, if they're happy and they have, linoleum floors, do you upgrade them to hardwood floors for the tenant? My answer to that was no. I mean, if they're happy with what they have right there. So if it's something that's going to impact the house, yes, you have to do that renovation. But if the renters are happy with the way the house is, they're paying their rent, they're happy, I wouldn't do any renovations until it's time to sell that property, or getting close to selling that property, because there is a chance you'll do those renovations and they will be ruined by the tenant. So depending on what the renovations are, and I actually responded to him and said, listen, you have a pretty impactful question there because there's more to that. Why don't we have a conversation off the air, or, a telephone conversation, so I can give you the right advice? And The second part of that question was...
Well, the second part, he said, one more angle I'm weighing, what if I move into the property as my primary residence for a year, then sell and move back to my current home? How would you think about that from a financial and strategic standpoint?
Okay, so two things there. If you're going to move into that property to do those renovations to keep them fresh and then sell the property, great. But if you think that going back to your house for a year, that it's now your principal residence, which it would be, but it'd be your principal residence, that you don't have to pay capital gains, that's wrong. Because you'll have to pay capital gains on that property from when you bought it as a rental, the whole time it was rented out. The only part you won't have to pay capital gains on is that 1 year that you live in that as your principal residence. So if you're trying to escape capital gains, that won't work.
Right.
The other thing about the house that you're in right now, you say you're going to move into this one for a year. Well, the property you're in right now is your principal residence while you're in it now, but when you move out of it and potentially rent it, that's now a secondary property, so that's subject to capital gains for the year you move out. So as a financial incentive, it doesn't really help you.
I don't think it makes a lot of sense.
No, it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it doesn't help you. So when it comes to the renovations, though, if he was tailoring that question more to, if I move into the house, do the renovations and then sell it, I mean, yes, the renovations will probably not be ruined. They'll be fresh, and that'd be great. But I don't think I would do that. There's no real financial incentive to move into that house for a year. And then as for the renovations, like I said, if it's something that has to be done to save the house, well, then you have to do them. But if the tenants are happy and it's just something very cosmetic, I probably wouldn't do them if the tenants are happy the way they are.
Yeah, and the other part, again, I mean, we're not tax accountants either. I would always refer back to your accountant if you're going to make those moves. And the other part, too, is you're going to have to spend some money on appraisals. If you're moving from one to the other, you need to get them appraised at the time that one's becoming an investment property and the other one's becoming an owner-occupied. And then if you're going to, a year later, move back into the other one, now you got to go and do appraisals again. Because if you ever get audited by CRA, you need to back up what those properties are worth for capital gains purposes.
A lot of people forget that, Frank. A lot of people have this house that they've lived in for years, and then they've decided to buy something else and turn that property into a rental.
Need to appraise
At that point, you 1,000% need to get an appraisal of that property, because the time that you were living in that property, it's not subject to capital gains. But by the time you move out, you need to know what the value of that property was after you move out, because you're only subject to capital gains from that point to the point you sell it as a rental property. So very, very important that you do get those appraisals.
And again, caveat, none of us here are lawyers or accountants, so make sure to talk to your
Frank pretends
people.
He's smarter than them. But,
Than you, not them. Than you. So, yeah.
But let's not go. We don't do public math here. That's the thing. So, no, that was a great question from Sachin.
Yep.
I know we've seen a ton of properties where people do renovations and they're tenanted, and the tenants, even without no malice, they just don't take care of a property as well as an owner-occupied, right?
It does happen, and I've seen a lot of people who have renovated their place to the nines, thinking, I can't wait to get that awesome tenant in there. And listen, there's some great tenants out there. I've always had some great tenants because I've done my due diligence to get great tenants. But there's also a lot of tenants out there that give tenants a bad name. And before you go do all these renovations, just know that a tenant will never care for the house like you would care for the house, because you've bought that house and put all that money into that house.
Never.
Never. So
they just don't have the attachment to it.
They don't. So if what is his name, Sachin. So if Sachin thinks he's going to go in and put some nice hardwood floors and a new kitchen and a new bathroom for his tenants, I probably wouldn't, unless they're complaining and things are falling apart. Like, you never want to be a slumlord, but at the same time, if they're happy the way things are, I wouldn't go spend money on the property if you don't have to, unless, like I said, unless it's something that will impact the house, like a leak or a roof or a windows or something like that.
Yeah, again, just getting back to that definition of a renovation versus maintenance.
Maintenance, yeah, right. That's maintenance.
Yeah. Replacing a leaky window,
maintenance,
roof.
Yeah.
And from the buyer perspective, coming in to purchase that property later, they're expecting those things to be done, correct?
Well, they are. I mean, buy this house, it's got a leaky roof. It's 40 years old. Like, it's not attractive. So, but yeah, they're expecting a roof. They're expecting windows that work. They're expecting a furnace that works. Yeah.
Unless you price it
accordingly. Yeah. I mean, and listen, a lot of people say, well, if I go put a brand new roof, a brand new furnace, and brand new windows in here, can I jack it up the price that I paid for all this stuff? The question is absolutely not. Saying that, will your house sell quicker because of it and put more money in your pocket? Absolutely, but never to the value of what you're going to pay for those things, ever.
Right. Yeah. You don't necessarily get that money 100% back. Well, we did talk about that a few shows ago about what gives you the best return, what kind of renovations?
Yeah, like little things. It depends on where your house is, how big your house is. If it's a million plus, well, people expect granite. If it's a townhouse at 530, they don't expect granite. So kitchens, bathrooms, paint, floors, lighting fixtures, those are things that really bring the value. Pools and landscaping and, insulation in the attic and like those things are nice.
You get pennies on the dollar.
You get pennies on the dollar. And the general rule of thumb with most upgrades, overall, the general rule of thumb is about 30% of the value. So, others are going to get you way higher and others are going to get you way lower. But the general rule of thumb is, you put $100,000 into the house, you're probably getting about $30,000 back off it.
Have a question? Give us a call, 521-TALK, 521-8255. We will be right back. Welcome back to the show, everybody.
Hey, before we get to that question, I just want to ask Frank a question. I think we talked about this. We're, I wouldn't say we're getting close, but we're getting closer to show number 1,000. Where do we hit? We hit 1,000 in early 2027?
27, yeah. Probably April, May 2027.
Wow. 1,000.
Yeah, crazy, eh? That's a lot.
You think we'd be better? Be better.
Speaking of numbers and better, so you were saying what? There's 14,300 sales last year?
Yeah.
4,000 agents in the city?
Yeah.
So my quick math tells me 3 to 4 ends maybe per agent.
3.4 is the actual number.
And
the average agent sells 3.4 in the city.
And your team did how many?
We did 569 deals with 14 agents.
14
What's your math
agents,
on that?
So my quick math says that's 35, 40?
41.
41. So
big difference,
congrats.
Like the average agent.
Congrats. No, that's, again, that's
huge.
To me, that's the difference sometimes. And listen, we have it in our industry too, where, the 80-20 rule comes into play, where 20% of mortgage brokers and agents do 80% of the business. I think obviously it's in your business as well, because there's a number of great agents in the city, yourself included with your team, that do the majority of the ends out there.
Yeah, but to 3.4 in the city, and we're doing 41 per agent is pretty good.
That's impressive.
The other thing,
a
feather in their cap too, is like if you have about 1% of the market share, you're pretty much dominating the market. We're over 4% of the market, 4% of all the sales my team does, which is a big amount.
Well, it's what we talked about at the beginning of the show today was experience is going to count the most in 2026 with where the market's at, right? So,
well, you don't go to a heart surgeon who does it once a year. You go to a heart surgeon who does it every day, maybe 2 or 3 times a day, and has done it over and over and over, and has a process and has the skill level and has all the tools in order to help you with your heart surgery. Well, I would say that it's your biggest investment. I think you should do the same with your biggest investment. Your real estate investment is go to the people who do it over and over and over.
Have the most
and over
experience.
and over. So we go ahead.
All right,
speaking of awesome though, and right, we're talking about how great the numbers are. I want to just hype up next week's show, because we're going to have Avish Buck in studio joining us. And Avish Buck is the Senior Vice President, Chief Operating Officer of MCAN Financial, who's one of the top lenders that we use. And getting some insight from him will be awesome next week. We keep reading.
What kind of things can the listeners hear next week?
So from a higher end, how when interest rates change and why they change, how many delinquencies are really out there, and what are the delinquencies about? Are they families that are struggling, or is it they've lost their jobs? Like that kind of information that you get from a higher end that you wouldn't get through your normal media sources. So he'll share that information with us. We have our conference coming up. Mortgage Brokers Ottawa have a 2-day conference Thursday, Friday, and he's one of our primary speakers. I'm doing a fireside chat with him on Friday morning for our agents. And again, it's information that is you don't get anywhere else. You only get it if you can somehow secure someone of his stature to be able to sit with you and actually talk. And he was very happy to come on the show. He came on the show about 5-6 years ago, and he was very happy to come on again. So I'm very excited
next
that
week,
he's going to be on the show.
Yeah, next week you may want to tune in, because if you want to know the ins and outs of what goes on and how the mortgage industry really works, it might be worth tuning in next week.
Well, and if you have a specific question, go to realestateandmortgageshow.com and put it in there, and we'll definitely ask him next week when he's in the studio.
And the difference between a non-bank lender, which doesn't have any corner branches, MCAN is not at a branch, the difference between them and the big bank, and why there are many advantages to going with them instead of going with the bank. So, again, I'm very excited for next week. And again, I think one thing Paul and I are going to promise you, in 2026, we're going to bring some good people to our show. The content is going to be unbelievable. And as much as, because we are hitting that 1,000 show, we have gotten a little bit better, I think. Not a lot better. We still have room to improve. But what we can do better at, I think, is bringing really good qualified guests on our show that add value to what our everyday listener. And we've got, I'm so proud of the listenership that we have, because Paul and I can't go to a restaurant and someone turn around and say, hey, I know your voice. I listen to you guys every weekend. And what Paul and I were talking about this week that's surprising is how many young people actually know our voices, because
crazy.
It's always been thinking that, only old people listen to CFRA. But now with iHeart and the fact that it's podcast, we get much more listenership.
And before we get to all the birthdays, I will say, Carrie, we did get your question. We will talk about it next week on the radio show. So thank you so much, Carrie, for the question.
Absolutely. All right, Frank, birthdays.
Yeah, I've got a couple of birthdays. Karen McLeish from my office celebrated her birthday this week, as did Lou Ferraco, who retired a year ago, but still a good friend and still sends me a lot of his clients to help. Really appreciate that. And then my cousin Rene Flores celebrate his birthday, so happy birthday to them.
I do have a few. John Hall from our team, one of my great outside sales agents, and Tracy Arnett. Both of them came over together, both of their birthdays today, so happy birthday. Wow. Also, I guess he's my ex-father-in-law, Wayne. He celebrates his birthday today. And one more. An old person who used to come on the show, no longer with me, but used to come on the show. Josh Batley celebrates a birthday today, so happy birthday, Josh.
Yeah, his son is, I think, doing really well.
His son is going to the University of Georgia for track, and he is killing it.
That's awesome.
He's like one of Canada's fastest runners.
You wouldn't know that by looking at Josh. But anyway,
hey, back in the day, Josh was a good hockey player.
Okay, there you go.
All right, just a reminder, everybody, if you have a question, head over to realestateandmortgageshow.com, submit it there. Frank and Paul will get back to you, and we'll talk to you next week.
And nothing changes in 2026. Please continue to support local businesses and charities.